We're on the air, guys. And gals, I should say.
You just want the tax levy, right?
Would everybody please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Debbie, would you take roll, please?
Committeeman Maringolo.
Here.
Committeeman Ray.
Present.
Committeeman Schuler.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey.
Here.
Mayor Paserchio.
Let's go right to liaison reports. Mr. Marengo?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Schuler?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Dorsey?
Yes, DPW, a lot of excitement. They are done collecting branches and debris from the storm, so if you put it up, it's not going to get picked up. If you do have it and can't dispose of it on your own, feel free to bring it to the DPW during working hours, and it'll get taken care of. Along those lines, because of the storm, we have a lot of mulch. So anybody that needs mulch, feel free to go to the DPW at any time during business hours, and you can get all you want for free. Also, if you want it delivered to your house, there is a fee for that, but call the DPW or email and arrange an appointment. Also, keep the recycling going. We brought 2 more loads of styrofoam and a foam pack to be recycled. I noticed when I was down there, the light bulbs, the fluorescent light bulbs, I don't know what the other ones look like, pigtails, those are recyclable too, bring them down. The aluminum, the trailer for the aluminum is about 3/4 full. So please, we have one last push, and a lot of money will get donated to St. Barnabas. We collect from it. They're going to start draining the lake this week to get ready for the Memorial Day opening. And I believe that is it. Oh, and I do have a picture they wanted me to show, just to show you some scale, how much mulch we have. Dennis, if you will. Yes, that is we zoom in, that is our front end loader, just to give it some scale how big the mulch pile is. And I've been down there, and that doesn't do it any justice. And it seems like it just keeps getting bigger due to the debris. So believe me, as I said, there's plenty of mulch available, so please go pick it up and use it. Thank you.
One update, and that's from HPAC. So the last HPAC meeting, just to let everybody know, they've selected a picnic table and a trash receptacle that will be situated at Turtle Rock Park down by the Cooper Memorial, by the cenotaphs there. The committee is going to obtain quotes to paint the exterior of the Millington School, or the Old Town Hall Millington School, and they're also going to they're also getting quotes to replace the sign, which is located in Long Hill Road, which is somewhat deteriorated. And they approved the plaque, the historic site designation and the plaque for the Myersville Grange, and that was approved at the last meeting. That's my update.
Thank you, Brendan. Just really quick, the first aid squad had 43 calls in April. They have 262 calls year to date. So if you do the math, that's, again, nearly 2 per day. So I want to publicly thank Captain English and the squad for the remarkable job they do night and day for the residents of Long Hill. I met with the Historical Society. They are asking if they would be able to use the old schoolhouse for displays, etc. I think it's best if we have them come in, perhaps at the next meeting, and they can present their ideas to the committee and to the public. I support them. I think it's a great idea. And with that, let's go right to the consent agenda. Comments? Poll, any of them?
Actually, if we could get a little explanation on 18-153.
Sure, I can do that.
So that is 18-153, the resolution authorizing the issuance of not exceeding, et cetera, bond anticipation notes by Long Hill.
Right, okay, so we are renewing, they're called BANs, bond anticipation notes. They're for 1 year. They're temporary financing. They last for 1 year, and we are renewing them. We are renewing them at a lower rate because we're paying off one of the things, I know that you'd mentioned we're paying off $110,000 on an open space bond that was used to purchase the park across the street. So this is part of the Township Committee's longer-term debt reduction plan. So you issue the bans, and then ultimately you'll have to do longer-term financing, but I think your goal before you do that is to be debt-free.
So the idea I wanted to convey is that this is a reissuance of existing debt.
It's not new debt, right?
This is not something new that we're carrying on. This is
No.
our CFO constantly looking at market conditions and
Well,
reborrowing what he needs to reborrow.
right, so the bans only last a year, so we need to renew them at the end of the month, because it'll be a year. But the key thing to note, I guess, that you're trying to point out is that, well, A, it is not new debt, but B, we're refinancing, so to speak, less money than we had before, paying it off. We're
Right.
paying down our debt.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just have a question on this 18-157 about the sidewalks. What additional work needs to be done?
157?
157 is DPW.
18-157?
No, it's,
Awarding contract for Main Central Ave Northfield sidewalk work.
Yeah.
yeah, oh, there's actually two
Oh.
157s.
Oh,
There you go, then it's 158, I guess.
No.
wait, what's
okay.
the other 157?
That's a
Let's see
DPW,
what
DPW contract?
5-4.
DPW
Actually, the
contract
first
should
one
be-
is 5-5, right? 155?
The DPW contract should be Resolution 18-155.
Oh, sorry.
So Jack, we could just.
Okay, I could,
announce
I
that
could,
on the fly.
I could, you want me to answer?
Oh.
Okay. So those roads were paved last year, I believe, right?
The sidewalks are good.
I'm sorry, the sidewalks were redone last year. So this award, what you're awarding tonight, is to install accessible ramps on the areas that were not part of the original project, but now the DOT is requiring it. So the DOT gave us a grant last year to pay for the sidewalk paving. They held on to $62,000, and they won't release that until we put in these wheelchair accessible ramps.
So then we get reimbursed then for it?
Well, we still have money, so this is being paid for from the original capital
okay.
bond. There was money, we got liquidated damages because the project was not done on time, so from the contractor, we got liquidated damages, so there's enough money left in that bond to pay for it. And then the $62,000 that the DOT is holding, because they hold a portion.
It'll get released.
We'll get that released to us.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Just a follow-up question on that. Didn't they approve the plan to begin with?
I think that maybe there were new regulations that were put out afterwards. I don't know 100%. This started before I came here. I can find out and let you know. But the bottom line is they're basically holding $62,000 until we do it.
Any other comments, questions? If not, looking for a motion?
So moved.
Second.
18-147 through 18-158.
Committeeman Maringala,
Yes.
Committeeman Ray,
Yes.
Committeeman Schuler,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey.
Yes.
Mayor Pasurcia.
Yes. And now we will go right to ordinances. This is first reading, introduction. Township of Long Hill Ordinance Number 419-18. This ordinance amends the Township Alarm Systems Ordinance. For those who weren't watching, the chief explained the purpose of this last week. I don't know if it's necessary, Jack, did you want to just briefly explain?
Yeah, the discussion was kind of open-ended last time, just that we needed to make it more specific because it was vague. So actually, I came up with the penalties, in part because, as you see in the old ordinance, the way it was, which goes way back, it made violators liable for the penalty, the general penalty, which can be $1,500 or whatever, in the discretion of the judge. So I thought for this kind of offense, and most towns have a specific penalty once you go over the limit. So what I made it was a $50 fine for the fifth false alarm and $100 per false alarm for succeeding. But, you know, it seemed reasonable, but it's up to you all whether that's what you want to adopt. And
So
keep
0
separate.
on the 4th,
Right.
50 on the 5th, and each successive violation would be $100.
Correct. Like I said, feel free to change that. That was just, I didn't have enough direction.
Any input? Comments?
If you've got a false alarm 6 times in 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The idea is to discourage people,
Yeah.
or to encourage them to solve the problem. In fact, we have a much higher grace number than most towns.
I'll move ordinance 419-18 as written in the agenda on first reading, with the second reading on June 13th.
Second.
Go ahead.
Committeeman Maringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Ray?
Yes.
Committeeman Schuler?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey?
Yes.
Mayor Paserchia?
Yes. So, ordinance number 413-18, this is second reading. Adopting zoning regulations necessary to implement the township's Mount Laurel Settlement Agreement with Fair Share Housing Center, and supplementing and amending Section 122 of the Township Land Use Ordinance entitled Zone Districts and Use Regulations. So first, I don't know if anybody has questions, et cetera, for Jack, and then we'll, of course, open it up to the public.
And Mayor Jessica Caldwell, the township planner, is also present this evening to answer any questions.
I actually have a couple of questions. I wasn't here for the introduction. I apologize, so I didn't get to ask these the first time around. And this is more for Brendan and you, Guy, as sitting members of the planning board. Each of these 4 zones has largely permitted 3-story buildings, which is something that doesn't really exist in too many places in town. Yet the property coverage is still being restricted to 40% and 20% building coverage. Was there a particular reason / discussion at the planning board level as to why we chose to go up rather than wide?
I think it was more that whenever the engineer laid out the sort of what it might look like, I think there were constraints there, even although with each of these parcels, and so that was the reason why it was, one of the ways to do it was to go up.
But you also, I mean, some of these are still looking at 50-foot setbacks as well. So we're kicking them back off the street. I'm not sure whether or not that means that the parking lot is going to wind up in front, which is something I thought we were trying to shy away from. It just seems like when me, I built a spreadsheet. I did some quick math. It just seemed like there was opportunity to go further wide, 50 or 60% lot coverage, and I think 60% was actually on the Valley Road redevelopment property.
Mm-hmm.
But the other ones are all at 40%. It seemed like there was a lot more room to go wide, and me personally, I'd much rather have less of the up and not look like our neighbors in Berkeley Heights and more of the wide.
Well, the discussion regarding the Tifa property was because there wasn't enough room not to go up.
Correct. but
Otherwise, you would look like Berkeley Heights.
And there are constraints on that particular one. There's constraints. You can't do it on the front on Division Avenue. You can't do it on the side that's facing,
Yeah.
that's facing the village. That I understand. I get. It's 40%. I'm not sure why we didn't allow them to go 50, but that's just me. Maybe they'd have to do less.
No, I think if I remember, Dennis is on the planning board, and he may remember something I don't, but it was constraints. Oh, he has the answer.
Even better. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And my faulty memory.
The other 3 properties, the main avenue, or the Valley Road redevelopment, the property in Gillette, and the Warren Avenue property, all have wetlands in the back. And so you're essentially squeezed to the front of the property anyway, and the only way you can get the apartment unit count is to go up. The 40% really can't be expanded to 50% because you run into the wetland restrictions at that point.
So those properties actually do have 50% wetland encumbrance?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, the Warren Avenue property is the most blatant. There was some discussion about allowing that to come closer to the roadway
Okay.
instead of the 60-foot front yard setback. But the conclusion was, since there are no residences across the street or behind or nearby, it was better to preserve the visual impact of the front yard setback and let them go up. And you can't go back because you run into water.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. As
Remember
I-
too, each of these properties are going to have to get site plan approval.
Yeah.
And they can, these are just bulk requirements, and they can get variances and work with the planning board.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, that was my recollection. There
know
were
there
constraints, that's why we
yeah,
went up.
I know there's a couple of, we live in a valley, right? So
Yeah.
there's certainly water constraints. I didn't realize that they were approaching 50% or
Right.
more, so.
Yeah, and one of the reasons our obligation is so low relative to surrounding towns
Right.
is in fact because of the wetlands.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Answers my questions.
Any other comments before I open to the public? Okay, so at this point, I'd like to open up the meeting to the public for discussions, or I should say comments on this ordinance. Please remember to try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, if you could. I'd appreciate it. I don't see any member of the public. Oh.
Charles Arenowitz, Millington. I'd like to back up a minute. I read the agendas, I come prepared, then all of a sudden the numbers change, and I don't get sent an updated agenda. So we need to do a better job on numbering the ordinances and sending out updated agendas. I don't like coming to meetings unprepared and having surprises. Do you agree with that, Mr. Mayor?
Sure, but
Thank you.
I think.
I don't want to get into the details, but if you want me to, I will. Would you care to?
As long as you can do it within 3 minutes, I'd appreciate it.
The ordinance is before you on the affordable housing. I want to go on record again. I've stated this to the planning board twice, to you once, and I'll make it twice to you. Hopefully, on June the 15th, Judge Hubner will be a little more receptive to my comments than the planning board and the township committee in front of me. We are, in these 4 affordable housing ordinances, going from a height of 2.5 stories, which is about 35 feet, to 3 stories, which is 45 feet. We are going from densities 12 units per acre to 15 units per acre. And I've got to read these again. Cooper Lane is 3.7. No Acres is 6.7 units per acre. Sunrise, 4.6. Chestnut Run, 4.12. Valley Road across from Chimney Rock is 6.4. And the only one that's large is Sterling Manor, which is 13.52. So you are proposing in these ordinances the largest density of this town. That conflicts with the goals of the master plan. Goal number 1, to conserve and enhance the essential rural and residential character of Long Hill Township in order to provide for the health, safety, and general welfare of the township residents. Goal number 2, to maintain the township's identity as a fundamentally low density. I emphasize low density. Let me go aside here. 12 to 15 units an acre is not low density. low-density residential community, ensure that future development is compatible with and sensitive to existing residential areas and established neighborhoods. Goal number 6, to preserve, protect, and enhance the natural resources of the township and to make environmental issues a central part of the planning process in Long Hill. You had people come in here and the Sierra Club support us on what's going on at the Tifa site. This is not consistent with the goals of the master plan. So what do? You either change these 4 ordinances or you change the master plan to make it consistent. That's your job and the planning's job, board job, to make sure these ordinances are consistent with the goals of the master plan, which they are not. Thank you for your time, and I'm sure that Judge Hubner will listen to my comments and maybe make some changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aronowitz.
Can I make a comment?
You're more than welcome to.
I agree with you 100%, Chuck. The only problem is if we don't do this, you'll be looking at 20 units an acre at the resolve of the court. So we have an alternative to accept however much we don't like it, 12, or roll the dice with the judge. And, Fair Share Housing came in and said 331 units was their initial pass for us. We're settling at 54. As much as we don't like it, I think it's about as good as it gets.
And to put that number in perspective, 331 is not the total number of
Right,
units.
no, 331
Divided by
affordable.
15%. We're talking about the possibility of 2,100 units. So, if we think 3 stories is bad,
2,206.
2,206, my math
Yes.
was a little off. So if we think 3 stories is bad, try 10.
I actually did have one comment about the ordinance that I'd like clarification, could be an error. The Warren Avenue property,
Do you know what page that's on?
it's 122.15.1,
Okay.
zone standards.
Page 16, I believe?
16 and
I don't
15?
have, I don't have page numbers on mine, I
16 and
apologize.
17. Zone standard is on 16.
6B, it says minimum lot width, 700 feet along Valley Road. I don't believe that property touches Valley Road.
Good catch. You're getting a gold star from Dennis. That's not easy. So can we amend that one, Jack?
Yes, I think it's not a substantive change, it's obviously an error.
Well, the question is, what is the minimum lot width? Is the intention to be 700 feet, or, and the erroneous entry is along Valley Road? I don't know that there's 700 foot of frontage on those lots.
Yes, the intention was that the overlay zone would encompass all the lots on the east side of Warren Avenue as a single project. If someone chose to buy the lots piecemeal and develop them piecemeal, they'd have to get a variance from the 700 foot, and they would probably have to present a major site plan that shows the development of the whole block, even though they had not bought all the properties yet. There was some discussion as to whether or not that frontage should be one lot, or the width of one lot, or the width of all 3 lots. And the conclusion was, we really think that development would only work if the developer had put the whole parcel together, and so we'd leave it at that.
So is it can you confirm that that is?
That 700 foot is
700
correct,
feet?
yes.
Okay.
But along Warren Avenue, rather
But
than...
along Warren Avenue, rather than,
Yeah, whereabouts are we?
Page 17, top.
16 bottom, I've got.
6B.
Yeah, 6B.
Yeah, my 6B is on 17,
Yeah,
top.
that certainly would be a typo.
so 700 feet along Warren Avenue.
So I would ask the Township Committee to amend by motion to make that correction. As I said, it's not really a substantive change, it's just a clerical correction. So under the circumstances, the ordinance could be amended and adopted this evening.
Yeah, I mean, the block and lot of references is
Right.
referenced.
Yeah.
That's how I'm
No,
like,
absolutely.
these aren't on Valley Road. So moved.
Second.
As amended.
As amended, yeah.
But just to amend.
J-
and
j-
then-
Just amend.
Motion to amend.
Yeah,
Correct.
second.
Okay.
I have some comments yet.
Okay.
Hang on,
I
hang on, hang on.
Let's just do this amendment, so
Finish
it's
the
on the
amendment.
record.
Right, so we have the amendment to 6B from Valley Road to Warren Avenue, correct?
And that is ordinance 419-18, 6B.
Committeeman Maringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Ray?
Yes.
Committeeman Schuler?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey?
Yes.
Mayor Paserchio?
Yes, and sorry, Mr. Sandow, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
I'd like to comment on the issue of the number of apartments, the so-called high density. You have to remember that we're comparing apples and oranges here. The multifamily zones that are being used as a base are townhouses. They're typically 2 or 3 or even more bedrooms. They have, they're required to have indoor parking for at least one car. And so a density in the order of 6 or 8 for that type of construction, for those size townhouses, is what we're looking at today. The developments we're talking about for a fair share are typically going to be 1 and 2 story, or 1 and 2 bedrooms. That's what we understand developers might want to build, particularly in the transit village environment. And so the number of square feet in the total project at 15 per acre or some higher number is not going to exceed the number of square feet in the townhouse zones that we have now. They're different kinds of housing, different kinds of construction, different target markets. And I would like to leave you with the thought that we're not specifically going after high density. We've still got floor area ratio issues that will be considered, and I think the total number of square feet of floor space will be approximately the same with the smaller units. And you should bear that in mind before you get too upset about the higher apartment count.
Thank you, Dennis. Any other member of the public?
Hello, Neil Lorber, Millington. First, I didn't know Chuck would say precisely what he said in his opening remarks, but I wanted to express that I particularly resonate with Charles in his remark as to how difficult it can be tracking the movements of ordinances and resolutions with the changes that come about from unless you try it yourself and unless you're on our end of the story, you will not realize how challenging, how very difficult, I should say, instead of challenging, it can be. And I understand today you will be voting on the $7.2 million bond, a sewer bond.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well,
416-18.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to indicate my appreciation of the fact that you have taken that up and have set that up, and that it's being done. And I'm sure I don't speak alone. I'm sure there are many who have that same sentiment as mine in the community. The statement about it, I guess it's to be called the agenda statement about it.
Mr. Lorber, if I could, if you're going to be here, what we're doing is just this ordinance. We'll get to that ordinance.
Okay. All right, you see, it's difficult.
You're out of order, Mr.
So
Lorber.
I'll be back later, right? Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that, but we'll be on the next one.
I'm sorry.
No need to apologize. So on this ordinance only at this time, please?
Sharon Armenti Chicherio,
Ooh, could
I've
you
already
please-
spoke at a
Excuse
couple-
me, could you spell that last name for me, please?
CERCHIARO. I've already made these comments to a few of you at the planning board meetings, but
Don't sit back down.
am I too close? But I want to make them again because not all of you have heard them. I am concerned about some of the same things that have already been mentioned. I asked why the most densely populated area of the township needs to have even more, why other places were not considered in town, in the township, not in town, but in the township. That was the first thing. And if any of these developments come to fruition, have we thought about traffic, which I mentioned at one of the meetings, traffic lights, police, fire equipment, sewers, schools, taxes, and how much this will increase the population of the town. I was going by how many apartments in total in the township. I'm saying 2.5 people per apartment. It'll increase about 10%. Now, some apartments may have 1 or 2 people, and some may have 4 or 5. I don't know. But I was just going on that average. And I know that it's required by the state that we have affordable housing. I know that. I know the state likes to have it near the train stations to make commuting available. But downtown Sterling, if this comes to fruition, downtown Sterling will be it's difficult now to get out on the streets during traffic time. If any of you, well, only one of you, I think, lives downtown Sterling. You know you can't get on from Warren Avenue to Valley Road, and from the side streets off Main Street, you can't get on there during traffic hours now. And to think before 1974, we didn't even have stop signs in town. You just kind of slowed down and went. We didn't have one traffic light, one blinker, right? One blinker or 2 blinkers? One blinker. You weren't alive. Don't be smart.
I was born in 75.
Well, we got the stop signs right before you were born.
That's right.
So my point is, I am concerned about all of these things. Should these come to fruition, who's going to decide about traffic lights and all these other things that I mentioned? Fire equipment, do we even have the fire equipment to handle the 3-story building?
Ladder truck.
I don't know if we do. We do have that right now.
We
We
have
do?
a ladder truck.
We have a truck
We
to
have a
handle
ladder, a
that?
75-foot aerial. Yeah.
Yeah. And also I agree that we're taking away from the semi-rural. People move here to be in this semi-rural community, and that's not going to be semi-rural anymore.
First off, thank you very much for your comments. They're all right on.
Well, I'm sure you've discussed them and thought about it before you decided on this.
Unfortunately, Fair Share doesn't care about
Any of that.
traffic. Right, not that we don't care, we definitely care, which in large part is why we blinked. You know, when we settled, we did not want to go into a situation of where our obligation would be 331 or more, by the way,
I
or
totally
54.
understand that. I totally understand
And
that.
as it's played itself out, and anybody who's watching or here can Google, what is it, West Windsor? West Windsor, I think it
Princeton, I
is,
think.
and Princeton.
I
mean,
know.
Princeton went into their court settlement thinking their best case scenario is 150, that's what they were going for, and their worst case was 250. And in fact, it ended up being 750 or something.
750 prospective need plus 250 that they hadn't satisfied in the past, so you're
So
talking about
1,000
1,000 new units.
And it's funny, I was at a conference where the mayor from West Windsor came up, and his comment to the group of mayors was, well, you know, I fought the fight, and, you know, I went out on the beach, and I got shot for all of you.
Yeah.
And my response to him offline was, no, you went out and fought for yourself, and that was very foolish. So, and their obligation is 1,500, what is that, 10,000 units? I mean,
Yeah.
I can't even think what that would look like.
Right, right.
They have 10,000 units now.
Right, so
it's
it's
doubling
going
the
to double
number
their,
of housing
double their
units.
town.
So our commitment is 54 to 72?
5472.
total
Yep, you're
units.
right.
54?
So,
Between
so
50
as rental units, 54. If they're single-family homes, it would be 72
For sale.
for sale.
Okay.
For
Now,
sale,
are those in addition to the ones that we already have now?
yes,
That's an addition.
yes, yeah.
How many do we have now?
Jessica, would you by chance
okay.
know how many
I was just
we
wondering.
have?
Well, there's also different types, which gets
I know.
confusing
I know
for
it's-
us.
I know it's all the
We
different
have-
categories.
So Lounsbury
Low, moderate, low.
and
I know
Lounsbury
it's
is
all
part of
different.
our settlement.
We have Morristown Road, I think there are 6 affordable units there. We have
On Chestnut Run?
Somerset Street,
Somerset Street is a
Right.
lot.
Somerset Street has some. Okay, but I just wanted to
Hang
go
on.
on record saying that I'm concerned about all these.
We have an answer to the
Sure.
question.
Sure.
Thank you for the questions. Those are exactly the right questions, and Jessica's
Just
exactly the right
just
person to answer.
with the building that's going on. Too much in downtown Sterling.
Jessica Caldwell, Township Planner. Just to respond, our prior round, we had 62 units, which we answered, so essentially around 62 units
That
existing.
was our obligation.
For the prior round, which we answered, and then we have 50 units that are carrying over into the third round. So we have quite a few units. I mean, some of those are bonus credits, but we have quite a few units. And in most of the developments that were discussed, Lounsbury and Chestnut Run, those were all inclusionary
And to the credit of
developments.
former committees, they kept up with the obligation that the towns had, or the town had in round one, round two, which is why we were not in a situation like, I guess, Princeton, that had an obligation
Correct.
from a previous round.
If that wasn't the case, I mean, there's 288 total units in our plan. So the fact that we're only addressing 54 to 72 right now means that, you know, prior administrations did a good job in addressing it over time in a way that didn't negatively impact the community. And I think that's what you're looking at doing today is the least that you can to address the need that you're required to.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I was not at the hearing, but Jack was, and I know you were. The judge at that hearing appeared to be appreciative that Long Hill had been cooperative in past years and therefore was reasonable.
Absolutely. The effort and the fact that we've produced units over time, I think definitely helped the municipality, that the judge was very favorable on that, as was Fair Share Housing Center as we were working with them through the process.
Thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other, we have somebody coming?
Ogens, Millington. When you go before
Sorry,
the, Pam Ogens, O-G-N-S, Millington.
No, it's the noise, not you.
Dennis just needs to get close to the mic and it fixes.
Midas touch. When you go before the judge on June the 15th, I would imagine questions will come up about thermoplastics, that site, and trying the attempts made to, with the DEP, to be able to use that for residential and for the fair share commitment. We know that's not going to be feasible. What is the thought, what's the plan to make up for those number of fair share housing units that were going to be at the thermoplastic site?
I think that's more of a legal question.
It's not off the table at this point. If it has to be taken off the table, then we'll have to come up with some substitute site. Now, the good news is that there are only 10 affordable units. Am I correct, Jessica? 10 affordable units were to be provided there, so it wouldn't be all that difficult to find a substitute site if we have to. But it's up in the air at this
I
point.
thought the decision was made that it could not be used for fair share for residential because of the inability to evacuate in that flood prone area.
That may be the final result, but at this point in time, as I say, it's still being discussed.
With the DEP, is that what we're waiting for?
Well,
Who's going to make that final
The
determination?
issue is a matter of egress,
Yes.
right, as opposed to a hard no. So those questions are still up in the air.
So there's the possibility of coming up with a plan for egress?
Yeah, so the designated redeveloper has taken some surveys of that area, and what they are in the process of doing is determining the cost of doing a residential development in the Sterling redevelopment area versus off-site somewhere else because of the need for the ingress and egress of to accommodate, to alleviate any flooding issues, right? So they're still in that evaluation process. We've gone to the DEP, we've met with them, we've taken the elevation numbers, and they've given us the standards and said, okay, you have to meet this. So now what they're trying to determine is what the costs are and which is the better solution.
So,
Short version is it's not off the table yet.
okay. And what's the difference between redeveloper and developer? Are they synonymous?
They are synonymous, but in terms of the redevelopment site, the state process calls them designated redeveloper, right? There's no difference. They're a builder, they're a developer, but in terms of that specific site, they're considered the designated redeveloper. That's all. It's just a name.
And the last item that I just want to keep in the foreground too is at the Millington Site, AKA the Tifa site, that yes, it is one plot of land, 11.5 acres, but we all know that 4.5 of those acres cannot be touched. That's the asbestos mound. So looking at the density, it does pop it up to 15, over 15 when you factor out that 4.5 acres can't be touched. I do appreciate that it is considered one piece of land. It's still not clear to me when you have an overlay, which is, I believed was the intent that you would be able to zone for another purpose, one section of a block of land, that we're still including that 4.5, but I believe that you've done the math and it has to be the 11.5, but it's really 7.5, and we all know that.
It's the same like the rest of the properties that are encumbered by wetlands, right? They're
I thought we weren't including any wetlands.
but they're all part of the calculation. The wetlands.
That's not what
and
I understood. I
the-
thought they
the-
would come up to wetlands, but
They
there
can't,
was
they,
no
you can't, you
inclusion
can't-
of wetlands.
You can't build into the wetlands, obviously, but if you have a 1 acre piece of property and 50% of it is wetlands and 50% is not, you can still build, or you can still utilize 50% of that property. Or 40% is typically our coverage area, right? So
Yeah.
you could utilize the 40%. It's not 40% of the 50%. It's 40% of the whole acre.
Of the whole
So
lot.
regardless of what the constraint is on the property, it's still the size of the property that contributes to a lot coverage calculation.
I don't doubt you. I'd have to go
Yeah.
back and check myself. I didn't think that any of those lots included wetlands, but I may be wrong.
Yeah,
I would have
they
to
do.
check
They
again.
all do. Warren Avenue has
Yeah,
some.
Warren Avenue.
The one down in Gillette behind Ancona Bistro has some in the back. There's a decent amount of wetlands in the back of that also. That's all that's left.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And Watchung made their
Right.
case. They had extensive study done
Right.
of how much actual developable land there was, and they got their fair share housing down from over 300 down to 50 some odd just recently. So it's doable.
Did they watch them? No.
Yeah, Watchung did. Yep.
I didn't think they had a settlement yet.
No, there's no, I spoke to one of the councilmen on Saturday, there's no settlement yet, unless it happened
Yeah.
this week.
That's, the Echo
No,
Sentinel
maybe they're
reported
hopeful.
it as after doing this study,
That may be their position.
Yeah.
that they're down.
I
Thank
hope
you.
they get it. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Any other resident? Chuck, we got 3 more ordinances you can comment on.
This is just a question. On page 22, it says Exhibit A, see attached. On the draft agenda, tonight's agenda, I couldn't find Exhibit A. Could
They're
you-
on the
Well,
back.
They're
They're
on
in
the
the
back?
back. I put them both out there.
Okay.
I try not to make it a
I think
120
I
page
saw somebody
agenda.
else coming up. That's just weird.
You are starting to scare me,
They're
Dennis.
not, the
I don't know if it-
development fees,
I don't know if it's Dennis or if you approach the mic from the right, my right, your left, maybe that's how it works.
you need batteries? I put them out on the thing under, they should have been with the, no, sir. Jack, am I correct that those fees were the ones set by the ones we had to pass in that ordinance?
Well,
Well, that's the next ordinance anyway.
get to,
The next order.
They were under the,
Do you know what Exhibit A was, Jack?
I know it's a separate document in our folder. It's on the,
Well, Exhibit A goes with the development fees. Exhibit A goes with the development fee ordinance.
Well, sorry, let's let this resident speak first, and then we'll address the missing exhibit.
Well,
Could you please
I'm
state
not-
your name?
Chris Roddy, Engineered Plastic Products, Mercer Street. I'm not a resident, but I might as well be considering the company's been there now 60 years as of a couple months ago, and I was that big going there, so.
can you spell your last name, sir?
R-A-T-T-I.
Thank you.
Now, I got a couple of questions, and it has to do with, I knew the DEP's, put those provisions about having to raise the roadbed to get out.
This is not necessarily about the redevelopment discussion.
It is about the redevelopment, because it's just why...
No, the ordinance is not about the redevelopment.
No, it's listed that you're changing the zoning there.
Yeah.
And my question is, without knowing that you could do it, why are you spending the effort and the time and the aggravation for some of us to change this ordinance when there's a chance it's not going to happen? Because for it to happen, I don't know, I'm assuming the developer is going to have to pay for it, but I'm just wondering why that ordinance is still going through.
Well, I think that's a legal question. I'll let Jack answer, but presumably it's because it must be rezoned to satisfy our agreement with Fair Share.
That's correct. It's being adopted because we have a June 15th deadline, but the fact that it's being rezoned doesn't mean it can be developed if it doesn't meet DEP requirements.
Okay.
So this ordinance, by itself, will not allow them to develop it under the terms of this ordinance. They still have to satisfy DEP.
Okay, and since we're not talking about anything else other than the ordinance, then I guess that answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
we might have solved it, Dennis. You might want to try the mic again. I think we,
No, it was clicking even after I switched this mic off.
I know.
Yeah, my phone was sitting next to my mic, so maybe it was my phone.
We suspect. We will prove the theory. I don't think that's in our meeting.
Any other resident on this ordinance? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
Move ordinance 413-18 upon second reading.
Second.
Committeeman Maringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Ray?
Yes.
Committeeman Schuler?
As much as it pains me, yes.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey? Yes. Mayor Pasergia?
Yes. Okay, let's move along. Ordinance 414-18, concerning affordable housing development fees and amending Section 185 of the Township Land Use Ordinance entitled Development Fees. comments before we open it up to the public? And this is second reading, I should have said that.
Jack, can you give us, or do you know what changed in
Yes.
Exhibit A? Or ours?
All it does is it increases the affordable housing development fee for residential from 1% to 1.5%. And actually, we had gotten co-approval to do this back in 2013 when David Banish was brought in as an outside consultant. I'm not sure what happened to it at that point in time. It may have just been the fact that COA was dormant and we had the sewer ban, so it really didn't matter. But this is the amount permitted by the COA regulations. And other than that, it increases the commercial development fee to 2.5%, but that's also consistent with the statewide commercial development fee that went into effect in 2008. So it's really not changing the commercial development fee.
And what was it, 1 to 1.5, 2 to 2.5?
Right, but as I say, 2.5 has really been in place since 2008, since it was a statewide uniform fee. It doesn't make any other changes, and as you know, these development fees go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and are used to defray the cost of the townships complying with its Mount Laurel obligation.
Yep.
And for those who remember, I know everybody on the committee remembers, we used some of those fees to have Lounsbury be brought to ADA standards.
Well, back then, as you may recall, the state also had a gun to our heads and told us that if we didn't spend it by June 12th, 2012, I think it was, they were going to come in and take it away.
So we wisely...
We hired David Banish, and he came up, and we gave it to Lounsbury, and they made most of the rooms handicapped accessible, as I recall, and improved some of the AC, HVAC
And the
systems.
lighting, I think,
Right,
as well.
yes.
Okay, so at this point, I'd like to open up the meeting to the public on this ordinance, 414-18, and this regards the fees as Jack just explained. I don't see anybody coming to the mic, so I'd look for a motion.
Move ordinance 414-18 is stated in the agenda upon second reading.
Second?
Committeeman Maringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Ray?
Yes.
Committeeman Schuler?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey?
Yes.
Mayor Paserchio?
Yes. So here we are, second reading, ordinance number 415-18, bond ordinance appropriating $641,182 and authorizing the issuance of $593,232 bonds or notes of the township for various improvements or purposes authorized to be undertaken by the township of Long Hill in the county of Morris, New Jersey. I don't know, Jack or Nancy, I don't know who's better placed to explain.
This is a bond ordinance to allow for funding of road paving this year and the acquisition of a front-end loader for the DPW.
Questions, comments from the committee?
Sorry, Nancy, this is just the DPW portion of capital?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to open up the meeting to the public on this ordinance. This is second reading, up for adoption this evening. Seeing none, I look for a motion.
Motion.
Go ahead.
I move ordinance number 416-18 as stated in the agenda upon second reading.
415.
Sorry, 415. Okay. Sorry.
Second.
Committeeman Maringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Ray?
Yes.
Committeeman Schuler?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey? Mayor Paserchio?
Yes.
Mr. Lorber, this is the ordinance we're going to be talking about.
But not, we haven't, give me just 1 second. Here we go. So, this is second reading, Township of Long Hill Bond Ordinance 416-18, bond ordinance providing for the improvement of the sanitary sewage system in and by the Township of Long Hill in the County of Morris, New Jersey, appropriating $7,216,712, therefore authorizing the issuance of the same amount, $7,000, wishful thinking, $7,216,912, bonds or notes of the township for financing such appropriation. So, questions, comments, or should, I'll open it up to the public at this point?
So I was just going to make comment as a reminder to everyone, this is, this $7.2 million is for sewer work, which includes the work described in the capacity assurance report that we saw back in February-ish, March-ish, from Kleinfelder, along with the capital funds required or outlined by the Remington-Vernick study that we had completed January of last year for the years 2017, 2018, and 2019. And that number totaled up the $7.2 million. So this is a commitment to do that first 3 years of financial investment, along with the capacity assurance report work to bring our sewer plant, I'll call it up to snuff, so that the DEP stops sending us naughty letters. Thank you.
And I guess I should point out, when I was at the conference, I did speak with our contact at the DEP. And as we suspected, it is true, the low-interest loan that we are eligible for now, on the terms that exist now, it was the NGEIT, now it's called the IB, and I forget what it, some kind of, was it Infrastructure Bank? Infrastructure Bank. The way that works is it's heavily dependent on money from the federal government. So that match, the way it's set up now, 75 state, 25 local, is subject to change dependent on what happens in Washington. And the interest rate itself is subject to a variable rate. So what exists today may not exist in the future. And as Cornell, you pointed out, this is just the beginning. Of course, we're going to have to do some more borrowing as time goes on. And if the amount that's available to be borrowed is reduced, then therefore what happens is you can end up with, say, a 50% local match. And then both arms you can get hurt on. One, the interest rate could be higher, and the match side, which comes from Long Hill Township, is borrowed at market rates. So, I mean, there is that concern going forward. So that's that. And if I don't see any other comments, I'd like to open this to the public.
Especially Mr. Lorber, he's going to say something nice about us, I think. I said, especially for you, Mr. Lorber, you're going to say something nice about us, I think.
Oh, I'll say something nice again. Repeat myself that I believe I speak for many, many people in applauding this $7.2 million sewer expenses bond. The agenda item, though, doesn't say very much. This was helpful, Mayor Pasurcha, your comments, but it loosely mentions 40 years, but it's not clear whether the agenda item is actually saying this bond is for 40 years. So I was just a little curious about that.
Good question. I'll let Jack answer that.
This ordinance just appropriates the money and authorizes the issuance of bonds. But if bond anticipation notes or bonds are issued, they'll be done by separate resolution, and they'll have all those details in them. But this is just the appropriation ordinance that allows, in the future, the Township Committee would have to authorize either a ban issuance or a bond issue.
Thank you. And it very obliquely mentions the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank. Is that the bank that this bond is being set up with or from?
That's
the New Jersey?
That is the funding organization, if you will. It's not a bank. It used to be called the New Jersey Environmental Infrastructure Trust, NJEIT loan. They now just refer to it as the iBank.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's basically the end goal. There is no interest rate on here right now because we are not currently actually borrowing it. At a time when we actually do undertake the project, after we have bids in for a project, at that time there will be further individual resolutions to actually borrow the money or part of the money along with the term and an interest rate. So we don't know what today the interest rate is 1%. In 3 months, it could be 1.5%. It's market conditions, which have been fairly favorable, but there's kind of only one way for them to go.
The agenda item does say New Jersey Infrastructure Bank, for whatever that's, whatever that's worth. I thank you, and since it's sewer business, especially since it's sewer business, why didn't the township go with the DEP loans that are available?
These are.
They are.
That is what it's called now.
They just changed the name.
They just changed the name.
Oh,
And I don't know
okay.
why. I don't know, Nancy, do you know why they changed it?
Well, I think they changed their purpose. They're now water and sewer infrastructure, so maybe
Gotcha.
that's why they changed the name. I don't really know 100%, but this is
That's a little
funding through the DEP.
You can admit it gets a little confusing for everybody.
Yeah.
For us too.
Yeah, I take it. And another nice thing, Brendan, that I want to say is I hear that former Mayor Shula has worked very, very hard in this general area, and I think that should be appreciated by many. I think you'll allow me to get this point in. That business about the, now I can't find that business about the first, second, third, fourth year of sewer rate structure. The one where the first year is 20.4%, and I don't know what I don't have the other.
But what was your question? Because that's not this ordinance, but do you have a question about that?
Yeah.
Maybe Cornell can answer it?
Has that been passed?
No, so the only thing that we are able to pass is the first year.
Okay, has that been passed?
We're working on it right now. So if this goes through, this will allow us, I believe, later in the ordinance, the sewer budget is in there as well?
It's a different ordinance
the-
later.
Not
Tonight.
There's-
It's tonight.
It's tonight.
It
We
is.
will be,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
once we finalize that budget this evening, that will set that 20.4% or whatever it is, and that's as far as this committee can go. What happens to next year's number will be at the pleasure of next year's committee.
Okay, but when it comes up later today, I can speak again.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
On
For
it?
today's, for the budget today, correct?
Right.
Correct,
okay.
but that does nothing for, I think you're referring to what happens in year 2, what happens in year 3, and year 4.
I understand.
What I
Right.
presented was an outline guide of what could, should, maybe happen. It's up to the committee next year to determine whether or not that next 20% next year is going to happen or not. We
But-
can't take that decision tonight.
But I can talk later on.
Yes,
about that.
absolutely.
Okay. I may try to squeeze in a comment or two on next year, third year, if you
Absolutely.
allow it at that point. The only other thing I'd say about the bond is, and I only have a grassroots knowledge of bonding and that kind of funding. Isn't it possible to make a deal where you contract for a particular rate over the 40 years? In other words, any time you choose to exercise your privilege to get bond money, the rate is set now for 40 years? Isn't there such an option?
You can, the only funding that I know of, we can get a fixed rate,
That's what
a fixed rate loan, just like a mortgage that sets the rate, but you borrow the whole amount now.
Oh, you have to borrow the
It's just like buying a house. You take that big bulk payment up front, and you can go for a fixed rate. And that's what we would be doing, being the rates are so low.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lorber. Any other member of the public? See, oh, sorry, spoke too soon.
Charles Arenowitz, Millington. Clarification. When I spoke at the first reading of this ordinance, I requested that you put in there more detail where we were spending the $7.2 million. Based on Mr. Cornell Schuler's explanation tonight, I'm assuming when it gets officially bonded, we will delineate it's $3.5 million for this, it's 2.1 for I&I, it's 500,000 for phosphorus, whatever. Is that what I'm hearing correct?
That would be accurate. Some of those would be large bid projects. Other ones are yet to be determined. You know, the Remington-Vernick was a budgetary guide.
Right.
We do not expect every line item to occur at the point in time where they've outlined, right? So they may say, do this year, do that next year, and it may actually wind up being the other way around. We're going to let an engineer figure that out when the time comes.
Okay.
This is just saying,
Here's what it's
the
looking like
the
today.
sum
and we
total,
don't know the
here's what we need to
proposals.
prepare
Okay.
for, here's what we need to budget for, it's coming, and the line items will certainly come later. The same
Okay.
way we've outlined what we're doing with on the previous ordinance with the roads.
Mr. Schuler, you can't miss meetings like this. You needed to be here the last meeting. Thank you.
I think that was an insult to guy.
Any other member of the public? Seeing none? Looking for a motion.
Move ordinance 416-18 as stated in the agenda upon second reading.
Second.
Committeeman Maringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Ray?
Yes.
Committeeman Schuler?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey?
Yes.
Mayor Pasocia?
Yes. Let's move along. Ordinance number 418-18, an ordinance concerning sewer user rates and amending chapter.
Wait,
No.
What did I do?
41718 on page 30?
Aha. See, you thought giving me an agenda
I'm trying.
was going to work. It was going good.
You just can't get out of the sewer business, can you?
No. So ordinance number 417-18, ordinance providing for various improvements in and by the Township of Long Hill and the County of Morris, New Jersey, and appropriating $202,050 therefore from various funds of the township. So, I mean, Nancy, did you want to just
Sure.
briefly talk about this?
Sure, this is this is actually a capital ordinance, it's not a bond ordinance. This is to fund various improvements in the municipal building, security upgrades, new doors. It is for equipment for the Sterling Fire Department and including SCBA packs, the self-contained breathing apparatus, as well as communication equipment for the fire department, radar signs and MDT terminals for the police department. I believe new HVACs in here for the police department. We have from the Open Space Trust Fund the installation of fencing in Myersville Field and rehabilitation of baseball and softball fields. Additionally, new heating and new HVAC for the municipal building. Only 2 of the unions, I believe there are 12 altogether, but we're only doing 2 at a time. And I think, and then there are improvements to the police range, which will hopefully help soundproof it a little bit more. I'm pretty sure that basically covers all of it. But we have quotes for this work, and that's how we came up with the $202,000.
This
Thank
is
you, Nancy.
basically the balance of the capital for the year.
See, if they had been back-to-back, the ordinances regarding capital, I would not have missed that.
I don't know, I think the mayor sets the agenda.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to the public. I don't believe there are any comments. Oh, here comes Mr. Aronowitz, and he's racing to the mic. He's got something very important to say.
Speak up. Charles Aronowitz, Millington. Real quick, is the open space appropriation, does it cover what we're going to do at Myersville for the baseball and softball fields and rehabilitation thereof?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other member of the public? Seeing none?
Move ordinance 417-18 as stated in the agenda upon second reading.
Second.
Committeeman Maringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Ray?
Yes.
Committeeman Schuler?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey? Yes. Mayor Paserchia?
Yes. Now we can go to ordinance number 418-18, an ordinance concerning sewer user rates and amending Chapter 22 of the Township Code entitled Sewers. Any member of the committee, comments, questions? I'd like to open it up to the public at this point. And here comes Mr. Lorber. I think I know what your questions are.
Hello again. Yeah, that was helpful to me, Mr. Schuler, your commentary that it's only the first year that's up tonight. But still, I think you might allow me to look a little bit forward to the second, third, and fourth year. I did a simple arithmetic. I determined the simple arithmetic average of the 4 years as reported in the Echo Sentinel, 20.4, 16.3, 36.2, and 15.2. The simple average is 22%. Would you be willing to consider more of a straight line path starting this year and throughout the next 3 following years to kind of standardize, I meant to say, the rate for the taxpayers? They would appreciate, I'm sure, having something spelled out and stabilized and simplified, the issue being simplified rather than the yo-yoing. I did a little bit of statistician type work in my career. So I think I believe it's reasonably possible to smooth out this rate ascension process over the next 4 years. As you well know, I personally was certainly disappointed that extra pain, and it is an extra pain, was not taken. So if you would want to comment at all on that,
I have no issue with that. In fact, I did it, right, as you're aware, that starting this year even, we're building, I'll call it a reserve fund, right? I'm going from memory, so my number might be off. There's, I believe, $450,000 in this year's budget that we're not going to be using, and it's going to be sitting in the bank, because in 2 years, we need $800,000 to spend. So we're trying to build that up over a more gradual period of time. We can certainly look next year at trying to average those first 4 years out a little bit better, but it was very difficult because next year, if we borrow the money this year, our debt payment starts next year. So we have the debt payment that starts. And then the following year, we have the additional costs of the fourth year of work that we need to do, right? The first 3 years of work are covered by that $7.2 million loan. So it was very difficult to try and level that any more than we did, but we could, that's certainly something we can, 22% average, we're not that far off this year, so I'm not that worried about that 1% difference. We can certainly look at lifting it next year to, instead of 16 or whatever it is, bringing it up to 22 to soften the 38% from the following year. That's certainly something we can do.
The other issue is we don't know what the priorities are going to be until we hire
Right.
those engineers who start to do the work and uncover some of the problems that were identified as potential in the capital program that they've given us. So we could be a year into this and have an unforeseen issue where we need to move up a priority. And that was one of the reasons why we talked about the capital reserve, is to make sure we have something, because we just don't know what we're getting into. The sewer system is in a terrible situation that's been compounded over the years, and as a result of the vote now, we are forced to fix this thing, and we just don't know, once we start peeling back the onion, where it's going to go.
And in all honesty, it not only, it doesn't have to go bad. We may find that
could be the other way.
With the $7.2 million, there's $400,000 of work that we didn't need to do. That, they said to replace that, but it's still working, right? Well, let's not do that yet then, right? So, and then we'll have money still left in reserve that we then won't have to increase the rate. So I expect that chart that is up on the website that I created, that is going to be a fluid chart from year to year. And as the years go by, there will be some actual numbers that are put into it in terms of expenses, and things will move a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you. I wouldn't have very much, if anything, to stand on if I had not recently become aware of just how easy the DEP has made borrowing. Mm-hmm. It's one offering that they put forth is almost like having a personal checkbook, but it belongs to the township. They can write a check, you can write a check at any time.
There's actually a website we can go to do it now. Yep.
If you hit a bump in the road or a crisis, big time bump. So you see, I'm very uncomfortable with this whole concept of surplus budgeting, or I forget even the word you used.
Capital reserve.
Huh?
Capital reserve.
Capital reserve, and you use another term too. I'm very uncomfortable about it. I think I'm going to do, I don't know where I'm going to get the time, but I hope to be doing a little research on that general issue. I think midway through the Christie administration, it arose. It didn't start here in New Jersey, not in our town, but these things have a small little new habits that are not good, in my humble view, for the public, for ratepayers, taxpayers, start to get going, and then they spread and institutionalize themselves over a limited number of years, and then they become par for the course. Slippery slope kinds of things. They used to say bad things started in California. You know, now they're saying bad things are starting in Jersey. I don't know whether you've heard that, but I have. So,
If I could just comment on that, I agree with you that there is potential that there could be a slippery slope. But I think that this committee has been quite fiscally responsible. If you look at our budgets over the last several years, we've been very frugal, and we're all payers as well. So I am not up for spending more money than is absolutely necessary. I do not want to raise the rates unless it's absolutely necessary. And we looked at this, several times over, trying to figure out the best way to do this. And it pains me to have a 20% increase, in the first year, at 15 or whatever it is next year, and another 30-something year. It pains me, considering that we could have been done with this, had been completely out of debt for this whole township for generations. It utterly makes me sick. But the fact is that we have to pay for this now, and there's no other way to do it other than to put it all on ourselves as the payer or to borrow some of the money. And we don't know what we're going to get into. We don't have, institutional knowledge of what's in the ground, right? So we've got to go hire people to tell us. It's going to cost us money. It just is.
thank you.
I feel terrible about it, but we have to do it.
I mean, if you're concerned that it seems to be the initial reaction of this committee to do the initial borrowing and then go pay as you go, just understand that decision is an annual or future decision, right? We can't say, oh yeah, the next time we do this, we're going to pay as you go. We can say we'd like to do that, but nothing that we do here today sets that in stone. That is a decision that will be taken up in probably at least 18 months from now before the question comes up again. So, I am very much against borrowing, except when I absolutely have to. I'll be very candid about that. But it's always a discussion and things change, right? It's going to be a very, pardon the pun, a very fluid situation. And we'll make the best of it.
Thank you.
Well, I think, I wasn't going to get into this, it's to Bruce's point, it's a walk into, an agonizing thought process. But the rate structure that, and I applaud Cornell and Bruce because they worked on this tirelessly, but it should be pointed out, the contractual increase in sewer rates, had the system been sold in 5 years, the example you used was a 5-year process, I think, where the rates will be in 5 years? Or is it 4 years?
For us?
Yes.
Oh, I gave 20.
No, but what was the 4 year?
So the first 4 years, I think, was up 113%.
Right.
Not sure, hold on.
And I think it came, so a $600 bill today, and we use that as the benchmark. Not everybody pays $600. Some pay less, some pay more, but that's the average, we thought. A $600 bill per your spreadsheet in year 2022?
I'm working on it, hold on.
Roughly, it was about $1,330 or so. And that should be, that's not the end of it. That's the beginning. The contractual rate, had the system sold to New Jersey American Water in 5 years, would have been $670. $670. Instead, it's going to be roughly $1,330.
$1,319.
$1,319, I apologize.
2021.
And that's what we know exists. To Bruce's point, we don't know what we're going to find.
Well,
So I think it's important for residents to understand where we are. And in terms of being frugal, that was the whole point. That's why we went to referendum. Unfortunately, it failed.
I don't think people are having real difficulty understanding the need for 20.4% as a starter. I can't speak for others really. But to get into these things, Bruce, if I may, and Guy, it's like resurrecting the whole
Yes.
2017 over 12 months. We don't want to go through that again as a township. So I'll just acknowledge your insights and feelings and leave it at that, but I don't want to resurrect that 2017 township experience.
Fair enough.
So thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lorber. Any other comments? See, Neil, what happened is you made me lose I was reliving 2017, now I lost my spot here. So I guess what I'm looking for is seeing no other member of the public. So I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to approve 418-18.
Second.
Committeeman Maringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Ray?
Yes.
Committeeman Schuler?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey? Yes. Mayor Pasurkia?
Yes. Okay, so this is Resolution 2018 budget to be read by title only at the public hearing. So, Jack, I think this might be your strength, no?
This is just a procedural requirement that you pass this resolution so that you don't have to read the entire budget into the record. You still can if you want.
Move Resolution 18-132. I won't give him a chance.
Thanks.
Second.
Committeeman Maringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Ray?
Yes.
Committeeman Schuler?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey?
Yes.
Mayor Pasurkia?
Yes. So here's Resolution 18-133, adoption of the 2018 budget. We've said it in the past, but I'd like to publicly acknowledge them again. Bruce and Cornell, thank you. You did a great job bringing this to us. And as Bruce pointed out, once again, what was the rate increase?
It was a 1% on the tax levy.
1%. And to your comment earlier about how much work has gone into these budgets over the years, the 9 years I've been fortunate enough to be on this committee, we have averaged 1.4% per year on the municipal side of the budget as regards property taxes, which relative to our towns across the state, that is actually phenomenal. So thank you, Bruce and Cornell.
I was going to say I was looking for a spreadsheet, but to put this in context, since 2012, municipal taxes have gone up a total of 9.53%
Okay,
in 7 years.
there you go. There's,
So it pained me horribly to just pass 20% on the sewer bill in 1 year.
I'm surprised you didn't break out in hives.
Yeah, I know.
All right, so I guess we would just look for a
You
motion.
got to open it to the public.
Now, yes.
We had
Well,
a
we
public
did-
hearing already.
We
Yes.
did.
We had it last meeting.
Yeah, okay.
The public hearing, we don't have to have another public hearing.
But you know what?
It is open to the public.
Yeah.
I know,
You
but
know-
that's because this is left from last week. 'Cause
We carried it over.
the auditor said that we did not have to have one.
You know, as mayor, I get to make decisions regardless of what the other four committee people say to me. So I would open this up to the public if anybody would like to opine on it. Seeing none, now I will look.
Move Resolution 18-133 as stated in the agenda by, it's not second reading. It is second reading.
Yes, adoption of the
Yeah.
budget.
Second.
Committeeman Maringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Ray?
Yes.
Committeeman Schuler?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dorsey?
Yes.
Mayor Pasurkia?
Yes.
All right, budget is passed.
Now we will go on to discussion items. What we have here is 26 Metzler. So I think, Nancy, if you could,
That is Jack's topic.
We've had ongoing discussions about this. There's an unusual situation where the JCP&L pole is on somebody's property, like 6 inches into their property. T. Golden needs to have a pole to extend the electricity to his property, and he's been the other property owner would not allow it, and JCP&L took the position that they needed a air easement in order to get to the pole. So in any event, he came up with this proposal to put it looks like a little bit into the pavement, and JCP&L apparently has agreed to that. Paul Ferraro has also looked at it and thought it was the best solution. He just recommended that end-of-road warning signs be put on it. So it's before you for your consideration. There is a copy. Does everyone have a copy of the plan?
I do not.
I didn't have anything for that. I don't have anything for, I didn't get anything on that.
Can pass mine.
Is it easier this way than just giving them an air easement, or the neighbor has to give them the air
The
easement?
neighbor has to
Oh,
give the air
forget it
easement.
then, okay.
So we had actually talked about condemning to get the air easement, but the cost of that would be prohibitive.
So Jack, this is agreed by all the professionals that this is the best way to move forward here?
Yeah, and I really defer to Paul as to the
Right.
practicality of the solution.
Because this has been hanging around for a long time.
A long time, yes. It's a very unusual situation.
Yep.
You know, because ordinarily, a utility company has an easement in the right-of-way. The municipality gives consent, I think it's for like 75 years. And JCP&L has the right to put their lines and poles
Yep.
in the right-of-way. The problem is this pole is off the right-of-way for some reason. I think the whole street is off. It's not centered on the right-of-way, and I think that's what led to the problem.
Right.
So the owner has a pole on his property,
Yes, a JCP&L pole on the property.
and there's no corresponding easement
That-
to
that's-
get off?
As I say, it was placed outside the right-of-way, and I think it's because the pavement is not centered in the right-of-way. I think actually some of the pavement is off the right-of-way. That's my understanding.
And is the new pole in the pavement, or does the road not go that far?
I believe it's in the pavement.
At the driveway.
I can't tell.
So here's the driveway,
Right.
right? Here's the old pole.
Right.
Here's the new pole, right? Basically, the driveway ends, the road ends right there.
As I'm looking at it, I mean, what this
Right,
is, the
okay.
property at the end of Metzler becomes useless if they don't have access to power. So what we're working with is a resident that lives there with the owner of the property at the end of Metzler to come up with a solution.
This has been going on for months.
Oh, longer than that.
More than that.
I just don't know how there's a pole there and he can say no. I mean,
Because you have to get to that pole, you have to cross
on
over
private
private
property.
property.
right, but the pole is there already. But anyway, I'm
I agree, it's JCP&L that's taken that position. In my opinion, JCP&L has a prescriptive easement because the pole's been there, his lines run to it, but we can't force them to do it. Our only other option would be to condemn, which would be time-consuming and expensive.
I have no issues. I mean,
Yeah, if that's.
I like
what Paul
electricity in
recommends.
my house,
Yeah.
Except during storms.
except during snowstorms.
Anyone else want to see the plan, or you've all seen it?
No, we trust you.
Don't trust me.
He's a lawyer.
Okay.
Not when it
So
comes
is
to
Brenda.
engineering things.
Matt,
What about Matt?
I'll leave you that.
Thank you.
So I will tell T. Golden, it's okay. We may have to take some
Absolutely, yes.
formal action, but at least we can give them the go-ahead.
Okay, so Nancy, we'll go to the administrator's report.
Okay, I covered a few things during the discussion, but there's a few things left. The improvements on Mitchell Road, the drainage improvements, will begin next week, and they will be completed by July 3rd. I already talked about Northfield, the award for the ramps. Morristown Road, Mayor, you'd asked at the last meeting, the design will be done this year, and will probably go out to bid toward the end of the year. Both phase 1 and phase 2, which is two different sections of the road, for which we received DOT grant money, will be awarded next year in time, hopefully for spring construction. That's the whole repaving, remilling, reconstruction of the road. You'd also asked about Cantor Park Trail. The reason that we've not awarded somebody to do the, continue the trail around is because we've only gotten one quote to do the work, and it was about 3 times the price that we were anticipating. We'd gotten a grant for this. And that problem stems from, it's complicated, but it has to do with asphalt and with plants shutting down because there's a particular kind of asphalt that needs to be put out on this path. So we're still working on it, and Paul is working on it, so I'll continue to provide you updates, but that is why that project has not started yet. And the last thing I have is about the Valley Road Bridge. I mentioned this at the last meeting, I believe, and Chief Naga and I attended a meeting on April 26th regarding the bridge. For those of you who don't know, the bridge is half in Long Hill, half in Bernard. It's about 90 years old, but it is structurally deficient. It needs major rehabilitation. Approximately 9,000 vehicles travel on the bridge every day. The weight load is 16 tons, which is less than the legal road limit, which is supposed to be 32 tons. So it needs to be redone. And there is a joint project between Marsh and Somerset counties to reconstruct the bridge. Right now, it's only in the concept development stage, but there will be 3 meetings for public officials, one of which is the one we already attended, and 2 public meetings. And one of the public meetings will be on June 7th from 5 to 8 p.m. in Bernard's Township Municipal Building, and the other will be in the fall, which will hopefully be here in this chamber. There is information available on our website, and the county, Somerset County is the lead. They've set up a website. You can get information on there. But as far as timing goes, according to the information we received at the meeting, it will be 4 years before this project even starts. So we're right at the very beginning, and I guess stay tuned for more information. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Nancy. So let's go into old business, new business.
I've asked our township engineer to look into connecting Carlton Road to Old Forge. I've asked him, there's a path along a paper street, Dogwood Terrace, to see the possibility of creating some type of path for the kids to use, and see what kind of grants might be available to do something like that. So hopefully he'll come back to us in a couple weeks and give us an idea of what's possible and what it might take.
Thank you, Bruce. Any others? So I mentioned there was a mayor's conference last week before, I forget when it was, and at one of the panel discussions, there were assemblymen, senators from both sides of the aisle, and they spoke very intelligently and passionately about many issues. But 2 of the issues that came up, which resonate wholeheartedly, not just with us, but with every elected official across the state, COA and school funding. And I had not meant to get up and speak, but I listened to all their intelligent comments for the better part of 2 hours, and I felt compelled to stand up.
You need to bring down the standard.
What's that?
You wanted to bring down the standard.
Motion to censor Committeeman Ray. So when I spoke, I said, with all due respect to our elected officials at the state level, I've just listened to you for 2 hours speak very intelligently on many issues, specifically COA and school funding. And they had all these ideas about how to fix it. And my response was, look at this room. There were about 100 mayors in the room. And I said, every mayor in this room, along with the elected bodies that they serve with, has to make decisions, sometimes unpopular, every meeting. But we make decisions because we have to. We have no choice. We must balance the budget. We must pay for sewer costs. We must pay for our schools. And I said, sometimes when we look back, we're not necessarily 100% happy with the decisions we made, but we make the decision. We don't talk about it. And I scolded them because the Supreme Court is often held up as the responsible party for the problems we're having with COA and with school funding. Or you attack the governor, whether it's Governor Christie, now Governor Murphy. And I told him that's not acceptable. For years, and I mean decades, the state legislature is hidden behind the Supreme Court, letting them make decisions that are really legislative in nature. And I said, instead of hiding behind the Supreme Court, take those ideas that you've talked about for the last 2 hours and do it. Just do it. Because then we won't be up here listening to your pain about COA, about changing the nature of this town. We won't have to listen to parents of our children in schools about the underfunding of the schools when we know the school funding formula owes $600,000 to both K-8 and to the high school. The legislature needs to act on this, not the Supreme Court. So, you know, when I finished speaking that day, 100 mayors all applauded and stood up. And I'm not saying that to compliment me, because all I did was say what was on their mind. I want everybody to understand. We try. We talk to our legislators. And please, write to them, call them. Enough is enough. Because this was round 3 for COA.
Yep.
Guess what's coming after round 3? Round 4. All we've done is kick the can just a bit, because we are immune from build and remedy lawsuits until 2025. Correct. But if some of those properties that so many of the residents spoke eloquently about cannot be built upon, that doesn't complete our obligation. It just moves it forward. And what I'd like the legislature to do is to take it out of the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court doesn't look at what towns appear, you know, the way we've worked for 250 years, I guess it is, 150 years, to make Long Hill look the way it does. They don't care about traffic, police, schools, fire. That's not, they don't even know what Long Hill is. So understand, I say this somewhat passionately because we feel it worse than you do, because we agree with you, and then we are subject to the slings and arrows. We accept that. That's why we run for office. We do our best. But we don't agree with a lot of things that come out of Trenton. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, I'll get off my soapbox, because Brendan, I saw him turning over a timer. You can't cut me off. All right, and then a couple of announcements, and then I will, in fact, open it up to the public. May 12th, that's this Saturday, the post office is doing their letter carriers food drive. This is the 26th annual, and I believe what we do is you put it out right on the mailbox, and they will collect it. So please, as always, that is an incredibly worthy cause. If you could help out, that would be appreciated. The library, Friends of the Library, are accepting donations of children's and young adult books for their children's book sale. Donation dates are May 13th to the 31st. Please drop them off in the bin in the hallway right in the library vestibule. The sale itself will take place on June 8th and June 9th. There were a couple of things I know I wanted to, there were announcements that weren't on there. May 20th, Rock Out with the Raptor Trust at the Sterling Hotel. I think the hours are 2 to 8. I attended last year. It was a phenomenal event. Unfortunately, I can't attend this year, but I encourage everybody to go. The Raptor Trust is one of the jewels in this town. For people who don't realize it, it is nationally recognized. It is something that I think we're all proud that is in this town. The Memorial Day Parade, I guess that is May 28th, lining up at 9 o'clock?
9:30.
It says lining up at
9 o'clock,
9:30,
yeah,
but
it
I think it's
starts at
better.
9:30, yeah.
It starts at 9:30, so lining up at 9 o'clock at Mercer and Main. I don't know, this is the consecutive year that Long Hill has held this parade, and it is one of the most moving and meaningful events in this town. Rain or shine, you know, I won't say the parade last year, unfortunately, the parade, I guess, we didn't do, but the service was done.
We did, it was the year before.
We did, but the service will always take place, so please, everyone come out. And then afterwards, there are hot dogs and something at the Sterling Fire Company. And then, even more so, the big event of the day is Cornell Schuler will be cooking up, I think, 22,000 hot dogs at the Sterling Lake under my tutelage. And I think that's it. At this point, we'll open up the meeting to the public on any topic.
Good evening. My name is Carol Praza, and I'm a member of your Historic Preservation Advisory Committee, otherwise known as HPAC. Our charge is to advise you, our Township Committee, on matters related to the historic preservation at Long Hill Township. We've also been the workhorses in the preservation of Millington Schoolhouse Old Town Hall. Perhaps you are not aware, but HPAC and the Historic Club have formed a joint subcommittee whose purpose is to discuss possible space for additional historic displays. Nick Farrar and I are representing HPAC on that committee. We met one time 3 months ago, and the Historic Club has not been available for us for a second meeting in that 3 months. Also, it's important to note that the Historic Club Executive Committee has never made their wishes or plans available for discussion to their membership at large. Let me repeat that. The Historic Club Executive Committee has never made its wishes or plans available for discussion to their membership at large. Neither the Historic Club, HPAC, or the Joint Committee will be meeting before the next Township Committee meeting. It seems premature for the Historic Club to present to the Township Committee before presenting to your Advisory Committee, before presenting to the Joint Committee, or before presenting to their own membership. Furthermore, proceeding on this timetable would preclude HPAC from doing our job, which is to evaluate the club's plan and advise you. Mr. Mayor and members of the Township Committee, I respectfully suggest that you reconsider your timetable on this matter. Thank you for your time and your service to our community. Thank you.
Carol, first off, good to see you, and thank you for your
yes.
eloquence.
I think I last saw you 1 year ago tonight, unfortunately. But
I did not know that, the date. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
You look great. Your suggestion is well taken, and absolutely. So if I could ask, could you get together with the Historic Society if you want me to give them a holler?
Well, I came here to hear the other business. This was not why I came here tonight. I was frantically
Well,
writing
that was
there.
incredibly well written as you sat there.
Yes, actually, Fred Rossi probably, who's the chairman, and would be the person, and we set up some sort of meeting for them
Okay.
to present to us, and he's the person to talk.
Happy to do so.
Yeah, good.
Okay, but you came for other things.
Yes.
No other
I
comments?
came for the rest of the agenda. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. It's great seeing you. Any other member of the public? Chuck, you slowed down from the last time you came to the mic.
As we all get older. Charles Rabinowitz, Millington. 3 questions, I guess. Based on Governor Murphy's decision or edict or legislation or whatever about trying to help us taxpayers to pay our municipal taxes through a non-for-profit entity so that we as taxpayer, Long Hill Township taxpayers can take a deduction as a charitable contribution. Is this committee moving forward in that regard?
Well, I could probably respond to that. I think I mentioned at the last meeting, we sat down, about 33 of the 39 mayors in Morris County with the governor, and he mentioned that. And he understands there's a challenge as to whether that would
Right, it's not
be
official. IRS has still got a rule on it, whatever.
I cannot speak for the others, and I'll let them speak for themselves. I don't know how to opine on something. I have no idea if there's any legal foundation for it.
Well, as you say, there are two threshold issues. One is the IRS, that's the big one, and the other is the state is allegedly going to issue regulations. So at this point in time, it's pretty vague as to what the possibilities are.
So I like the way
whether
you
it's going to
phrase
be
it,
effective.
the law, the edict. Look, I appreciate the governor trying to help us.
Right.
I just don't know where we go from here.
So we're waiting for, this committee's waiting to see what develops. I mean, because...
Correct. As I say, the state is going to issue regulations, which may give us some guidance, but the key issue, as the mayor said, is the IRS. And I suspect they're not going to look favorably upon it.
Okay. Second question. On tonight's executive session, you talked about the land swap. I believe it was also in the draft agenda, either late November, early December. Can you update the public on what's going on with that?
Look at this. Five
okay.
days. And the whole audience, the whole TV audience looked at you.
Next meeting.
Next meeting.
Next meeting.
So you can't tell us anything tonight?
Not yet. But we'll be happy to share as soon as we have something formal.
On tonight's consent agenda, there appeared to be a need, an immediate need, for a purchasing agent. What's the push and what's that all about?
We had a purchasing agent until December, when the CFO, former CFO left. Having a purchasing agent does a lot of things. It's important to have one, I believe, because there are numerous laws that guide procurement in New Jersey, and it's important to have somebody who has a handle on them. But as you probably saw, there is also a resolution that raises the bid threshold. If you have a QPA in New Jersey, your bid threshold can go up to $40,000. Without it, you're at $17,500. So any project that anybody in the municipality wants to do that would be over $17,500, we'd have to go out to bid for. When you have a QPA, that gets raised to, in this case, $40,000. It ends up saving the town money. So, for example, when Paul Ferraro has to do a project like the Mitchell Road drainage, if he didn't have to go out to bid, and I cannot remember how much that one cost, but let's just say that it was over 40,000. There was 30,000. It was right over 17. So, if he had to go out to bid, then his costs are going to go up from between $5,000 to $10,000 per project because of what he has to do to prepare the bid documents and everything. So when we have, another great example is right now, the tree grinding for all the branches from the storm that DPW collected. We had the DPW director rented, or he hired somebody to come to the yard and grind all the brush and all the branches. That cost $4,500 a day. He could only do 3 days because he was already at the 17.5. So it allows us to be able to operate more efficiently and more effectively without going out to bid for everything over 17.5, which I'm sure you can imagine is pretty common, right, because of prices. But what it ultimately does is it saves money.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Any other member of the public? You got up quicker this time.
I'd just like to comment on Mr. Arenowitz's comment. I think he only asked half the question. If the if you were given authority by the legislature to establish a charitable trust that I could put my tax money into and take a charitable deduction, what makes that trust deductible? It has to have approval to be a charitable trust. And who gives that approval?
IRS.
Long before they audit my return, they have to make that a legal trust. And I suspect that they could grind this whole thing to a halt simply by refusing to open the envelope when you send in your application to establish the trust.
I'm not optimistic.
So what I'm suggesting is I don't think there is an issue that individual taxpayers need to worry about, because you can't put your money into the trust until the IRS blesses it.
Thank you, Dennis.
I think we just need more people in the state government to do 9.5% over 7 years.
Good luck.
Get the costs under control.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Actually, better investment at the state level.
we have to balance.
Actually, if they just funded this, the school funding formula, our taxes would go down like 30%. If they just funded it the way it's written, the law is written.
Okay. Chief, anything for us? All's good? All's quiet in town? All right, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Good night, everyone.
And it's